All right, folks, we are live. If you guys are just tuning in, make sure you say hello. Let's see what we got here. Ritesh, good to see you. All the way from India. Shadrach, you were first at 642. Good job. No prize today. Mike Hen, always good to see you. Dan, good to see you. Lethal Venom, always good to see you. Hey, folks, everybody, welcome to the Dangerous Liberty Podcast, where the only thing more dangerous than liberty is the lack thereof it. And, of course, we always talk about guns, gear, training, and many other topics. We have special guests. We have a very special guest today and a very special podcast today. We have Bill Powell here. We're definitely going to get deep into some self-defense law, and I will. He's just here. I'm going to cover most of that. He's just going to give me my left and right limits. I'm joking, Bill. We'll leave that to you. All right. What I'll do is everybody's just chiming in here and getting set up. What we'll do is I'm going to go ahead and let Bill just introduce himself, tell you a little bit about himself and his background, and we'll take it from there. Bill, it's all you, man.
Gary, thanks very much. And I didn't realize the executive studios were going to be this grand. This is
man.
Amazing. It's amazing. Some of you probably know me, maybe not. Bill Powell. I'm a lawyer here in West Virginia. I have been a defense lawyer as well as a county prosecutor and a United States attorney appointed by President Trump during his term, for the Northern District of West Virginia. So I served in that role. But as an aside, and for the last 20 years or so, I've been giving presentations on self-defense law and gun law generally, not only in West Virginia, but in several states for professional groups and citizens groups across the country. So it's kind of one of my hobby law areas that I've always found very fascinating. I'm a gun guy. I shoot. I've gone to several of classes with Gary and have for a long time. So I've always been. It just seemed like a natural match. So that's me.
Yeah. And, folks, again, Bill, I really appreciate you. And obviously this is the first time that you've done this with us. This is the first time we've had you in the studio, and I'm glad you're here. It's a lot easier than doing the remote thing. So it's good to have you. But folks, again, this is definitely an area of expertise that typically a lot of people pay a good amount of money to go to things like this. So first of all, Bill, just, thanks for, your time. And obviously your expertise and sharing that with us so generously. And, what really spurred this on, I've been wanting to do more of this and make sure that we're covering a little bit better when it came to self-defense law. But definitely because of the Houston shooting, and there again, I just kind of posted that video, just kind of see the reactions of different folks. And there again, I was a little bit shocked at people's perception of self-defense law. And there's more to it than that too, is it really comes down to the fact that we also need to be very aware of the fact that, when these types of incidents happen, it's either kind of hero or zero, right? So when you see something that I think is taken to the extent of what we saw in that Houston shooting, man, that makes a lot of gun owners look bad, right? And we just need to be careful about optics. So, and we need to understand the law, because the law should dictate a little bit your training as well as your tactics that you're going to employ. So, all those things feed into each other. And I think it's really important for us to take a holistic approach when it comes to not only guns, firearms training, tactical training, and of course, part of that should definitely be some legal knowledge and training as well. So I definitely wanted to have Bill on here and kind of at least start to guide us in the right direction. And hopefully we'll do some more things like this and maybe do some in-person seminars. And, especially anytime any event like this takes place, maybe we'll have Bill on if he's available and kind of break things down. So I think that's really important. And again, as you guys are coming on, or as we're talking, make sure you guys are throwing up questions. You guys are part of this conversation too. So this is not just a one-sided conversation. We want to hear your input as well. Let's do this real quick. Summer, if you will, let's just do a real quick recap of that video from Houston and kind of talk about, I actually want to hear, you guys, most of you have heard my video and my reaction video to that. I want to hear what Bill has to say on some of this after we watch it. So it's that traffic cone down there. So you got to share the screen first. And poor Summer's stuck at, she's the DJ today. Entire screen. Entire screen. There you go. Allow. All right. Now pull that up and rewind it. Just move the cursor, babe. I remember my first time on a computer.
While Summer's working that, Gary, let me just say that,
Yeah.
you know, the knowledge of the law stuff is, I think, an integral part of your training. You have to know it.
Sure.
This is a good example. It's very instructive. The Houston one, we have maybe a couple of others to look at later on, but three things are going to happen if you're in one of these scenarios. One, you get lucky, and it's just a clear case of self-defense. Two, you freeze because you don't know what to do. You don't know what your rights are. You don't know what you can do, which is bad.
Yeah.
For sure. Or three, you go too far and then you go to jail.
Yeah.
So, you know, you better figure out ahead of time and know what the situation is and what you can do and what you can't do, because I expect what we're going to find here is this guy went just a bit too far.
Yeah. And you know, that's a great point when you talk about making sure that you know ahead of time of your knowledge of the law so that you don't get into that situation where you're stuck trying to figure out what to do or what you can do. In the same manner that we need to have our firearms fundamentals innate to where we're not have to think about those so that we can, you know, determine what's going on in the situation and figure out how to act appropriately, as opposed to sitting there thinking about, you know, the fundamentals or anything else. So, you know, you're absolutely right. You know, having the law ingrained in what we can and can't do is just as important as the tactics that we employ in our decision making under stress. So that's a great point.
That's right, under stress. That's even the worst thing about it, because unless, as you guys do a great job with this in your normal training, but to try to think about these things when you're under stress.
Yeah.
That's why they have to be ingrained.
Absolutely.
So you don't have to react.
All right, play that, Summer.
I think he shot to the beat.
he did. He did have a certain tempo about him. All right.
Okay.
You can quit sharing our screen now. It's just up there, stop sharing screen.
There you go.
All right. So yeah, Bill, take it from there.
Okay. Actually, Texas law, I looked this up. It's really not a whole lot different than West Virginia law. Texas goes a little farther than West Virginia law in a lot of ways. Like for personal property, you can have deadly encounters, believe it or not. But you know, let's just take it from the beginning. The guy with a gun comes in for a robbery, and at that point, it's obviously a situation in which, even in West Virginia or any place else, you have the right to defend yourself. And more importantly, you have the right to defend others. So the fact that he may be pointing the gun at somebody else within that restaurant and not him, the ultimate shooter, is of almost no concern. In West Virginia, for instance, you stand in the shoes of the person you're trying to protect. So if the person you're trying to protect would have the right to use deadly force, you would have the right to use deadly force on their behalf. And that's the way you're judged.
Yeah, let me pause you right there, Bill, because one of the things that kept coming up that I thought was irrelevant to begin with, but again, I just want to hear specifically and directly from you. You know, people kept bringing up the fact that he was shot in the back. What's your thought on that?
Not relevant.
Yeah,
totally. Just it's not a problem at all. You know, quite frankly, let's make a different scenario. You're standing behind the guy in line, and he's about to shoot the teller or the clerk at the store, and you have a firearm. I could shoot him in the back right there to protect that person.
Sure.
So the shooting him in the back is not is not a particular legal concern for me. Probably tactically it made more sense because the other gun was pointed away from him. But
I think you're supposed to you're supposed to turn him around and challenge him to a duel.
Course, yeah, that's right. Make him shoot first and wound you so that you can fire back. No, so that's not a concern in any whatsoever for me.
Yeah, and the other one there that came up a lot was, and again, I think this was one of those things that was kind of pushed into the narrative, because I just watching that, I don't know how anybody would come up with this, but the fact that he may or may not have been leaving at that point.
Yeah. Well, he was still waving the gun around. He was not, obviously the video is going to speak for itself as to what he was doing or not doing. But the way you're judged in the law in West Virginia and lots of places is the reasonableness of your actions. What is reasonable to you to believe at that point? This guy's waving a gun around, what he believed to be a gun, and I think later proved to be a toy gun.
Sure.
But believed to be a gun, with patrons on either side of him waving it around after just robbing the place or robbing people within the place. I think that's a fairly reasonable assumption to make, that he's still a threat to you and or others within the restaurant. So now, shooting him in the back, if he had left the store and you chased him down the sidewalk and he was running away and you shot him in the back, that's a different scenario. But in this scenario, I don't see that being a problem.
That makes it. Yeah. So let's talk about, again, just a lot of things that were thrown out there. The fact that it ends up being a toy gun.
Of no consequence whatsoever. You're judged by the circumstances at the time, not by hindsight. The one example I give all the time in classes is the police officer that sees a kid with a dark gun in an alley in the middle of the night, can't see, but he has what appears to be a gun. Police officer shoots the kid. Obviously, it's tragic. Finds out it's a toy gun or an unloaded gun. Well, that's unfortunate, but that's not going to be. He's not going to be held accountable for the fact that it was a toy gun at that time, and nobody else will be either, assuming that it's reasonable to assume that it was in fact a real gun.
Sure. Yeah, and that just, all those three things, those are three things that I heard quite a bit, folks. When we're talking about, I saw lots of people saying, oh, he's going to get in trouble, or he couldn't have shot him because he shot him in the back, which clearly that's not the case. The other one was, oh, because he was leaving, he shouldn't have been shot. I don't even know, other than being told by the media. I mean, I don't know how anybody could look at that and say that for sure that he was leaving. And then thirdly, the fact that he had a toy gun. So, if you're sitting there and this is a real gun and this is a real life-threatening situation, and you're having to figure that out because you don't know, of course you're going to pause, and it could cost you your life and somebody else's life. And this goes back to what we're talking about is if you're carrying a gun around, I think as a responsible gun owner, and definitely as somebody that's carrying a gun out in public, you have a responsibility to know what you can or can't do, because your inaction can cost someone their life. And of course, your action, if you do something stupid, can cost not only other people's their lives, but also your freedom. So, we clearly have a lot of work to do when it comes to educating the public on self-defense laws in general. So I think this is a really good, really good podcast to have, and to have Bill here. But it's definitely something that I think that, I want to make sure that we're doing a better job at educating, and even people. This is not something I touch on because of obviously the liability of talking about law in the middle of a class, but this is something I'm going to definitely push a lot harder for when we're talking about, and just trying to instill in people the importance of the need to get legal training. It really is, because that ends up being a tactical part of the decision making. There's no doubt about it.
I will say also, one of the other issues I saw people picking up on in this Houston thing was the number of rounds that were fired.
Yeah.
And I think that the law will allow you to use those rounds to the extent you need to stop the threat, whatever that may be. Now we'll get into what he did towards the end of this video,
sure.
but whether it's one round, there's no legal requirement that you fire one round and wait, see what's going to happen. Fire a second round if you need to, third round. And I think scientifically, in those kinds of situations, you've seen studies of police officers. You ask them after a shooting, how many rounds did you fire? 2 or 3? You fired 8.
Yeah.
Okay. I've seen this a number of times where these studies have come up. You have no concept of how many rounds you ultimately fire. You've probably seen studies where, people they misfire and they just keep pulling the trigger even when they don't realize they're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So you're allowed up to the line to stop the threat. That doesn't mean kill the person. It's stop the threat.
100%.
And that's a critical point. And I was a little shocked, quite frankly. I've seen some of the comments about basically, oh, if you have the right to kill the person. That's not what the law says.
Yeah.
Stop the threat.
100%. Yeah. And I don't know, folks. Look, at the end of the day, too, I'm as I don't want to say cold-hearted, but I have little sympathy for people that do stupid things, right? And especially if they're going to threaten my life. But at the same time, if a dude decides that he's going to pull a gun out on me, and I pull out a gun, let's say I shoot him 2-3 times, whatever else, he throws the gun. Maybe I missed. It doesn't matter. And he puts his hands up and says, I wish I hadn't done that. I'm not going to continue to finish him off. And that seems to be almost the thought process that a lot of people think they have the right to do. You don't. At the end of the day, that you're now the bad guy. I mean, I don't even know if we could make I'm sure there could be a legal argument that at that point, if somebody else behind you has a gun, they could protect that guy from you. So, we definitely have to, just like you got to conduct warfare with a little bit of honor and integrity. I think we need to approach this with some honor and integrity at the same time. Now, I'll tell you right now, folks, if, we're in the middle of the night, somebody breaks into my house, I don't know that if they were, things would be different if they're breaking into my house. It'd be a little bit different. We'll leave it at that. There was another point that I was thinking about when we were talking about that, Bill. Doesn't matter. Anyways, so there was a couple of questions up here. Christian Clark said the shooting in the back is irrelevant. We shoot combatants in the back all the time. Oh, that's exactly what I was talking about. Going back to the warfare, folks. And again, I will let Bill speak to the domestic law issue, but I do know that according to laws, the Geneva Convention, and many other things, that if I go up to a combatant and I secure his weapon and then I shoot him again, I've committed a war crime. So again, going back to just conducting yourselves in an ethical and moral way so that you're a good example, and that situation that you happen to be in, or this guy isn't used to fuel, a very strong movement to take our rights away, because they're doing a damn good job. I'll be honest with you.
And I think the critical thing for this guy is that if there weren't other patrons in that restaurant and he was walking away, that is probably a different scenario, because then it's just the threat. It's the threat to the shooter at that point.
Yeah.
And if the guy's leaving, he's no longer a threat, or it could arguably be no longer a threat. But keep in mind, the threat in that circumstance, in that video, is because all of the other people that shooter has the right to protect in the event something like that happens.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Let's see. Jeff Hahn said, I think the problem arises after the 4th shot. From there, I think he will have issues defending his actions. So let's just let Bill dive into that a little bit. So you said the initial shots.
I think there were 9 total shots.
Yep. So there was 4 with that initial shot before he hit the ground.
Right. And then the 4 more arguable.
Well, let's back up just a little bit. Did you see any issue with those first 4 shots?
No.
Okay.
I see no issue with the first 4 shots. I don't have a huge issue with the next 4 shots. On the reasonableness of the situation, if the guy still has the gun in his hand, if he's still capable of using it. He dropped
that weapon.
He did drop it at some point, and we know he dropped
after the 4th shot.
Okay, and we know at some point for sure the guy knew he dropped the weapon because he picked it up.
100%.
And then he shot again.
Yeah.
obviously the last shot is what common some people have referred to as the kill shot. I'm not clear about whether that was a kill shot or not, to be honest with you. I don't know whether he hit him.
I think that guy was DRD after that first 4. That's dead right there.
Which, if I'm his lawyer, this is what I'm doing. I'm hiring a medical examiner because I'm going to try to convince that jury he was dead before that third shot, right? And then everything else was just, then you're disrupting a dead body.
Yeah.
It's all meaningless at that point because, I think you're probably right. He looked like he was down well before that last shot.
Yeah.
But it was dumb.
And then, so what do you, from a couple things here. Number one, from a legal standpoint, let's say, again, the first 4 shots are good. Second 4 shots, questionable. What is the major legal challenge to that last shot?
Well, he's not a threat.
Mm-hmm.
You're only allowed to use deadly force when you have a reasonable belief that you are in serious risk of serious bodily injury or death, or that somebody else is. None of those things existed at that minute, at that point.
Sure.
So you don't have the right to finish him off. This is not an execution chamber. You're not judge, jury, and executioner, as they say. If he was alive and going to get treated, then he would be handled in the judicial system, and that's the way it goes. But that's not what happened, obviously.
So another argument that I heard a lot of, which again I'll let you parse, is that, well, he could have had another weapon on him.
Okay. Well, did he show it? Did you have reasonable belief that he had another weapon? Would a reasonable person believe he had another weapon? Could he have used the other weapon given his condition? Again, I understand what the argument would be. I just don't think it would be a very fruitful one.
Yeah, I agree.
He could have done a lot of things. He could have rose from the dead, and turned into a zombie and tried to bite my head off.
Sure.
But, I don't see that flying though.
Yeah, and that goes back to back to my hypothetical that I had earlier is, I get into this gunfight with this guy. He throws his gun, puts his hands up. I don't get to continue to shoot him because he could have another weapon on him.
Right.
In the same vein that, cops get shot at all the time, when they're going to do a traffic stop. It doesn't mean that they can, kind of recon by fire before they go up to there because somebody could have a weapon on there. So,
and you just take it to a normal circumstance. If you have just a normal situation where somebody is coming at you, you can't shoot them on the anticipation that they might have a weapon in their pocket, even though they were going to try to punch you. I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
100%.
Humanly or legally.
Yeah, and we've already brought it up a couple of times, and I mentioned it and I thought it was a pretty self-explanatory, and I thought most people understood it, and I clearly took that for granted. But will you talk a little bit about the reasonable person argument and just kind of define that a little bit?
Sure. In West Virginia, there's two reasonable standards: one objective and two subjective. The objective standard is what you're taught in the law is what another reasonable person would do under like or similar circumstances. So let's assume jury box is filled with 12 other people. They're thinking, okay, given those circumstances, what would I have done? Is what he did reasonable if it's something that I would have done? So that's the objective reasonable standard. There's also a subjective standard, and that is that I, if I'm the shooter, would actually have to believe my life or the life of another was in danger before I took those actions. And I really believe that. The examples I give in classes all the time is like, if I was being threatened with a wiffle ball bat or something by a 7-year-old, there's no subjective realization or belief by me that he's going to do me serious bodily harm. Just not. So it's not reasonable at that point. So there has to be a reasonable belief by you, and that's different for different people. What is reasonable to Gary is different than what would be reasonable to a 5'2", 90-pound woman in a parking lot in the dark. It's a totally different scenario. So that's totally subjective based on that particular person in those particular circumstances. Those are the two reasonableness tests that need to be met in these self-defense scenarios.
Makes perfect sense. Let's see. I have seen an argument that he could have moved and that justified the last shot.
And my question, I guess the answer to that question is moved and done what? His gun was gone at that point.
Yeah.
And I guess he could have moved, but the fact there's no legal right to keep shooting until he stops moving.
Yeah.
That's not the legal standard.
And I think that's probably the kind of the crux of the confusion is there's a lot of folks that clearly have this misconception that as soon as someone threatens you, you have the right to kill them. And that seems to be kind of the driving thought process behind most of the comments. And as you know, Bill very eloquently laid out, that is not the case.
Well, you mentioned it earlier, the 0 to 0 kind of thing. This guy was so close.
Right.
If he had stopped at those even 8 shots,
sure.
Okay, he would be in the front page of the paper as a hero.
Yeah.
In Texas, particularly.
Yeah.
I mean, they throw a parade.
Yep.
And then he did that last thing, and now it's going to cost him potentially his liberty, and certainly $100,000 in legal fees, because that's about what he's going to pay.
Yeah, folks. You know, again, those last 4 shots, or the after the 4th shot, and then those 4 more, but right before the last one, between 1 and 8, I was 100% on board for. I was like, man, this is good. And then, folks, I was horrified seeing what happened at that last shot. That was, it definitely caused me pause. And I know, and I can almost guarantee, folks, number one, obviously, I'm surprised we haven't seen more of this on the anti-gunner side already. We may, but again, that right there turned that whole thing. That now goes from a good, reasonable argument to carry a gun, or why people should be carrying concealed and out in public, to now we have a whole argument of, look, we got vigilantes out there that are just going to finish somebody off. And I'm waiting for race to become an issue of this. And luckily it hasn't, and I hope it doesn't. I don't think race was a factor in this at all, but that has never stopped anyone from before. So, again, it is what it is.
Let me point out one other bad decision that really hasn't been talked a lot about.
Yeah.
But a really bad decision. What did he do after the shooting?
He left.
He left. Yeah. Are you insane? Not only he left, but all the witnesses left. I mean, I don't assume he knew that there was a camera video the entire episode. Let's assume that's the case.
I don't think he was thinking about that at all.
So here's the rule. You involved in one of these shootings, the best chance you have is to keep the witnesses there, who are going to, by the way, who are just robbed by this guy and likely going to be pretty positive for you and have seen everything and can give statements to the police. And you shouldn't go, because here's what a prosecutor loves: people who flee the scene, because it's one of those things that is a
universal.
It's a potential instruction to the jury that leaving the scene is evidence of guilt.
Yeah.
And you just can't do it. I'm not saying you talk to the police necessarily or give a statement, but at least right then. But you certainly don't leave the scene, and you certainly want to say, "Hey guys, hey, all you people, I just got your money back. Can you hang around for 5 minutes until the police get here, and you can tell them what happened here?" And I think they're still looking for the guy. I don't think he's turned up yet.
Yeah. No. So they have.
Oh, they have.
I know that at least they've contacted him. First, he was only contacting police through his attorney, and then they eventually apparently scheduled some sort of. They ended up talking to him in person, and he has been referred to a grand jury.
Okay.
So while we're talking about that, before we answer this question from Aaron, from the prosecutor side, what laws do you think that he could, or what crimes do you think he could be potentially being charged with?
Manslaughter, certainly. I'm not sure all the degrees of murder in Texas. They don't all have to be premeditated. It could be a second-degree murder, reckless in conduct type of thing, but most likely a manslaughter situation, given the scenario that we're looking at. Aggravated assault, perhaps, if Texas has such a thing. So that would be certainly something to keep an eye. I don't know the background of this guy. I don't know whether he was a felon, whether he was allowed to even have a gun.
Thing.
I mean, who knows what his personal situation is. So I don't know the answer to that question, but those are the probable charges that are going to be brought. Ultimately, though, the grand jury is going to decide whether any charges at all should be made.
Any sort of like again, after it's no longer a threat, a reckless discharge of a firearm or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's if they don't go for the, you know, the charge of kill of the man being killed, then I expect they're going to do very little after that. I mean, I don't think it's a reckless discharge of a firearm. I think it's more likely a, you know, abuse of a dead body if
Yeah.
in fact that's what happened.
Aaron said, and again, this was another thing that kept coming up, like, oh man, you know, once you're all pumped up like that, you can't stop, basically. So, you know, if you want to address that, Bill.
No. The answer is no. That may get you a lighter sentence if you're when you're convicted, but adrenaline is not generally one of those things that you can rely upon any more than saying I was drunk and made some bad decisions because of that.
Yeah.
So, you know, adrenaline though is again, if you take any of Gary's courses or other high quality courses, one of the things, if you ever you have to be put under stress. Because I'll just tell you right now, shooting a paper at 7 yards or 10 yards or whatever the case is to shoot the bullseye, that's nothing like these type of scenarios or other stressful environments that you have to make split-second decisions and your adrenaline does go up. You make bad choices. So again, that goes back to how you should be trained. And I'm not saying even guys who are, you know, combat veterans,
they make mistakes all the time.
They make mistakes all the time, and those guys do it all the time, and they're trained. I mean, they're in that environment all the time. So it's just one of those things you need to be very sure about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
This kind of goes into the same. I kept hearing and seeing this argument too on social media. Well, you know, he was under stress, his life was threatened, so he could claim temporary insanity.
Highly unlikely. That's a very difficult defense to get. Again, that might be something that you're going to get the benefit of at a sentencing where you're going to get a little lighter sentence as a result of that. The judge will understand that, but highly unlikely.
Yeah. I wonder if you can illegally restrain someone that you have had to use violence against after you've shot someone.
If you can legally restrain someone.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think you'd get away with that. You're not going to be charged with anything for that. You could, I mean, let's say you shot him, he was still crawling around or still wounded. You could hold the gun on him, say, just stay where you are until the police get here.
Or if you happen to have zip ties or something like that, you can zip tie him.
Sure.
That goes back to a kind of a citizen's arrest, right? Yeah. At any point, folks, and Bill, correct me if I'm wrong, but basically anytime you see someone that's committing a felony, that's where you can apply citizen's arrest. Is that? Yeah,
citizen's arrest, or, you know, all these gun situations, you see many examples of people, you know, jumping on the guy.
Yeah.
Until police get there, you know, stopping the carnage, so to speak. And that's nobody's charging those people with illegal restraint of the guy.
Sure. Let's see what we have here. I'm sorry. Yep, throw it up there. I'd love to hear what Mr. Powell feels about the USCCA. Full disclosure, I'm a member. Having skilled outsider viewpoint will help with how I interact with the organization. Hit it.
Well, I'm part of that group too. So,
he's a paid lobby. Can't trust anything.
No, I got the insurance. That's why I got it.
No, I know.
That's why I got it. So, you know, I'm not sure what the answer to the question is, except that if you're asking me whether or not you should have liability insurance, if I'm carrying a firearm on a fairly regular basis, yes, I'm having liability insurance.
Yeah, and folks, you know, we actually were an affiliate of the USCCA. I did a lot of research many years ago on them. Everything I've seen on them seems to be up and up. I did a lot of research when it came to whether or not they were legit, in that if you got into some sort of armed conflict or some issue with even police, everything that I looked into seems like they were there. They had legal counsel on hand. They were bailing people out. So everything that again, this is older research. I don't know if they've changed anything. It could be like Wounded Warrior, where they're good one moment and not so good the next. But everything I've seen is very positive when it comes to USCCA.
Yeah, and there's other organizations. I'm not, you know, lobbying for them one way or the other. If there are 2 or 3 groups that have this types of insurance, it's really not that expensive. And you know, this guy has walked in. Was not kidding around earlier. This guy's walked into $100,000 legal fee case.
Yeah.
And you know, you're gonna spend $25,000 on experts.
Yeah.
So it just, it's a dramatically big financial decision as well as other kinds of decisions
100%.
for this guy.
Yeah, and that goes back to why it's so important to make sure you know the law, making sure that you are setting yourself up for a situation both from a legal standpoint, from a tactical standpoint, to where you're walking out of there. So, because chances are, even if you do everything correct, you could, just like Bill said, you could end up with hundreds of thousands of dollars of both actual legal bills, but also civil liability as well. Next thing you know, his family's suing you and everything else. So there's lots of things. I'll put it this way. There's lots of folks carrying guns around that haven't put a whole lot of thought into all the responsibility and all the liability that ultimately can go with that. So, just something to think about. I also want to add to that when it comes to USCCA, when I was researching those companies, I did run into several companies. I don't remember their names. And if I did, I wouldn't mention them here, but I did find good evidence that there were several of those companies that, they were charging these people, monthly dues and supposedly have all the insurance and all the benefits that USCCA does. And then when they did get a call, they weren't there to respond to it. So, or were very slow to respond, or actually didn't follow through on a lot of the issues, or found reasons. That was one of the things they kept. One company, I found case after case where people were complaining that they found a reason not to cover them.
Yeah.
Where I was not able to find any of that with the USCCA. Not to say it's not there. And again, that research is years old now.
Do your research.
Yep. Do your research. Again, it's your responsibility. So again, do your personal research. Let's see. Insurance and reciprocity from state to state carry rules. Yeah, I don't know if that's a question or not, John, but that's another thing too, is you got to make sure that you are aware of, especially if you're crossing state lines and things like that, what is legal and what's not legal.
Sure.
I know just north of us, 25, 30 minutes north of us is Maryland, and they had a bad reputation of waiting for West Virginia license plates to go across that, and they would run those license plates and they would see that they had concealed carry permits, and that was almost definitively happening. So anyways, just be aware of that. Do your research and do due diligence. Yeah. Do due diligence.
And we do have reciprocity with about more than 30 states that, a concealed carry permit here is good in, Ohio or Pennsylvania, for instance, or Virginia. But the self-defense laws aren't necessarily the same there. Yeah. So again, it's a chore, but if you're going to be in those states and you're going to be carrying a firearm, it's word to the wise. There are lots of books out there, and I can get Gary names of some of the titles of books, but there are lots of summaries on explaining what the laws are in those various states, and you ought to be familiar with the states that you're going to travel in.
Yeah, maybe we get just on our what's our newsletter, babe? Yeah, on our Substack, maybe we get Bill to write an article or something like that and throw a bunch of resources in there.
Happy to.
On that, and we'd love that. So that we'll twist Bill's arm on that and get him out for some range days or something. Transporting a rifle from Maine to West Virginia for Gary's long range. My understanding that the rifle ammo need to be locked away separately. I have a new 2-door Bronco, no trunk, my best option. So again, man, that's going to come down to all those different states that you're hitting in between there.
Lock case, back seat. Yep. And I'll just tell you that right now, I tell this to people all the time also that, you're coming from Maine, you travel through places like New Jersey, you better not have a magazine that has more than 10 round capacity. Yeah. Those are illegal.
Yeah. And
you could be locked up for those just as easy as anything else. They're looking for reasons to lock you up.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Yeah. I know there's been at least 2 cases of soldiers in New York where, literally active duty or active duty National Guard folks were caught with magazines in their vehicle, and they were actually prosecuted. Mm-hmm. I don't know what all ended up happening. One I know got several years in prison. I remember another one. I don't remember what happened with that. There was a big outcry on that, but hopefully someone has intervened in that. I don't know if that's the case or not, but you got to be careful, man. And that's another thing too. Why, one of the options is always, rent our guns. We don't charge a bunch for that. It makes it easier for you, and it also makes it easier for us because we know those guns are set up and ready to go, and we're not troubleshooting guns, but that is an option. Tony McCaws, Lynn says, very frustrated when you travel to states. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed Vince. Go back to Vince. I didn't mean to. After shooting the bad guy, he removed the stolen money in order to return it to the victim. Was it wise to do that? Tampering with evidence.
Yeah,
It's a good question.
yeah. I guess in the perfect world, the police would not want you to touch anything. I guess if, this guy's being the Robin Hood of the day and giving the money back, that's good. I'm sure the witnesses.
Well, when you got to leave in a hurry.
Apparently everybody was booking because they had someplace else to be. But they got their money back, which is good.
Yeah.
It probably buys their testimony, I guess. Well, and I guess they're probably happy because otherwise the police would have it locked up in an evidence bag for the next 6 months, and you wouldn't get it back.
Well, that's true.
But so yeah, I mean, I don't think it's of any big consequence. It was probably nice. I mean, I do think it shows his intent a little bit. I think he was PO'd that these people were being robbed.
Sure. And, if nothing else, like you said, it might even serve as a little bit of grease in the wheels to make sure they don't testify against them.
You gave my money back.
Tony says, very frustrated when you travel to states that you have reciprocity, but visit a liberal city within that state that has different limitations and exclusions. It's true. Stay away from there. Don't go there, Tony. Stay away from liberal cities, liberal states. Don't go to Washington, D.C. No trunk. Place firearm in lock-in case. That's out of reach. Live ammo cannot be near firearm either.
That's right. That's what you do. I mean, that's the best thing you can do. I've gone to places. I've taken the bolt out of rifles and put them in a separate place, and just so that I can have an argument that's not really a firearm at that point. But the ammo should never be anywhere close to the firearm, and the firearm should never be anywhere close to where you could get it in the event you were stopped by the police.
Yeah, and I know in Maryland, at least, I know for a fact they require both the ammo and the gun to be locked up separately. So, again, do what you can with that. And again, if you're coming to one of our courses and you're traveling, folks, if it's easier, use one of our guns. It doesn't cost you much. And it saves us usually a lot of headache of troubleshooting guns anyhow, so we can concentrate on training, but completely up to you. Yeah, you need to reserve guns early. Summer's typing that right now. That's all right. Reverse guns. Reverse guns. She's over there typing in the dark.
It's tough being a producer.
It is. All right. So that's a good spot, I think, when it comes to it. Bill, if you want to just kind of take charge, and if there's anything else
we have a couple of videos we can show too.
That's absolutely right. So, Summer, let's go to share our screen again. This is like the most unelegant way to do this thing. Yep.
Yeah.
We got a couple videos, a couple case studies.
Don't start it yet,
Nope.
Summer. Don't start it yet. I want to set the background for this.
So before you do that, Summer, go down to the bottom and hit the presentation. Little icon right there. All right. Go ahead, Bill.
Okay, so the background for this particular video, and we have two of them here. This particular one is actually a West Virginia video. I was living in Charleston at the time. This happened in Putnam County, which is the county next door. So I was very familiar with the facts of this case, and I'm not going to tell you all the details of my involvement, but be that as it may, this is a drugstore, and you'll see in the screen right now is a clerk and the druggist behind the counter of this drugstore. And you'll see the bad guy coming through the front door, and basically he's going to come in because he's trying to rob them of narcotics and money and everything else. So go ahead, Summer, and hit the play button.
And folks, there's no audio, just so if you're wondering.
So we can talk on top of it, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so they're going about their business, and you'll see in a second the one guy come in through the door. I think it's him now coming in. He's very polite. So he says hi to everybody. How you doing? I'm about to rob you.
Scoping it out.
Okay, he pulls a gun. Okay, Summer, pause there a second, will you? Oh, you went to the wrong. Okay, back there. That's okay. That's okay. That's all right. That's all right. No problem.
Fired. You rehired because no one else will work for me.
Go ahead. Go ahead and run it through. We'll just run it through. I'll tell her. We'll fill it in later. It's easier that way.
No, she can pause it now. She only messes
Okay,
up
so
once.
he takes the gun out. You'll see this. Okay, and he's pointing. The guy in the foreground, the guy closest to the bottom of the screen, is going to react. Go ahead, Summer. I like a druggist who carries a gun. Okay, now he keeps shooting because the guy was shooting back at him. This is a perfectly legitimate shooting. Now, the only thing I'll point out is that if you'll see the first couple of shots, and we're not going to go back, but he used his employees as a human shield, which is kind of not cool if I'm working there, unless I'm paying a lot of money. But he goes back and checks on the guy and does not shoot him again, I might add.
This guy just leaves.
Yeah, calls the, yeah, he's out of there. I'm not staying around for the police. This guy was not charged. Okay, so this is a perfectly legitimate shooting. Summer, go to the next video. This is in Oklahoma City. This is also a robbery. You'll see there actually two guys come in to rob the place. Go ahead and hit the play button, Summer. The guy shoots. Second guy comes in. What they don't realize is the guy in the back has a gun and he starts shooting, and you see these guys booking it now, okay? Now, this couple of bad things happen. There's the guy with the gun. He goes after the guy on the sidewalk. That's a no-no because he's already running as he's no longer a threat. But then he comes back in because there's one guy down. He's shot. He's down. So he steps over him, goes back to the back. What do you think he's doing? Gary, you have a clue?
It's probably reloading.
He's reloading. That's what he's
what I'd be doing.
That's what he's been doing. No, he's not only reloading, but now he comes and he shoots the kid again.
Oh.
Okay. So this is
I think he went to the same course the other guy went to.
Exactly right. So again, this guy was charged and got convicted.
Oh, wow.
But this is very similar in one sense to the Houston shooting.
And you said this was Oklahoma?
Oklahoma City. And so that was a perfect example of
no, don't stop sharing, baby. Go back to that first video. I want to talk about that a little bit too. So get to where the guy comes in, pulls the gun. No, yep. All right, stop right there. All right, folks, this is something I talk a lot about in class. And this is a classic reaction, and this is classically the wrong reaction, is standing still and reaching for your gun. All right, if you're besides the fact that we have, a little bit of ballistic protection in front of us that happens to be, living human beings, this is very natural response, and it's the wrong one. And we talk about this in class of if you're going to pull that gun, if that's the decision you're making, you need to be moving laterally to that threat, and you start moving first before you pull the gun. But in this situation, I would have not pulled the gun. I would have waited for an opportunity because he's super lucky. Go ahead and hit play. Stop right there. So if that guy had been looking at him, it was very clear to me that he was pulling a gun.
He was looking at the cash register.
He was looking at his target, which was the cash, right? But he, again, at that point, if the person committing the robbery had seen that, he would have had the clear tactical advantage and definitely would have smoked that dude. So you've got to make sure that you, number one, get training. Get training, and there's a lot that we're talking about here that may not get put in context over this, that you would see put into context and demonstrated much better, obviously, in a real life training scenario. So, reaching for a gun, reacting and reach for the gun is almost always the wrong answer. We're either going to wait for that opportunity to do that, or if you are going to do that, you need to be moving. All right, so you can go ahead and exit out of there.
He was ahead of his time. He was wearing a mask before COVID.
Right. He probably brought COVID to us. All right. Reserve guns early. I can't see it when you are you getting ready? Good pro tip. Never thought about removing the bolt. Yep. Yeah. So right there from this point, folks, Bill, I'll just give you the floor. And if you want to talk about kind of kind of go through your basics, normal class or just discussion about anything else that we didn't cover when it comes to good practices and other things that people may not be aware of when it comes to the law.
Yeah, I'll take it in a little different direction. Let me just mention a couple of things that
Sure.
we haven't talked about. Number one, you can never be the aggressor. You can't start a fight and then use a gun in self-defense because you're going to get your ass kicked, or that's happening. So, you know, somebody gets the better of you, and that's not the situation that you can use a gun for self-defense. But let me go just to the situation where, in fact, you are in fact in a deadly encounter, and unfortunately, it's an unfortunate circumstance. Nobody wants to ever be in that situation. But here's the drill. If that happens, you call 911 or have somebody do it. And here's the critical thing. You know, you talk to people all the time that they refer to and you hear the news reports, they return to the person that was shot as the victim. No, you're the victim. And I think that's the most important thing to make sure everyone's clear about with the police and with everybody else. When you talk to them, this guy tried to shoot me. I shot him in self-defense. This is what I'm wearing. Here we are. And they come. Put the gun away. Don't wave it around. You are going to be put in cuffs if you're in one of these encounters, whether you're right, wrong, or questionable. It's going to happen every time. They do it for their protection as much as anybody else's. And it may be only for an hour. It may be for 5 minutes. It may be for, 4 or 5 hours, but that's going to happen. You're going to be put in the back of a patrol car. The important thing, though, also is to try to get as many witnesses to stay, like this guy did not do, because it's really important for people to see what happened and to report what they saw. We can't count on cameras being everywhere, even though in today's society, they're almost everywhere. But you can never know what they're going to actually see. I never recommend clients to talk to the police right away or to give a statement. Even the police departments in a police shooting, the unions have a requirement built in. You have a 24-hour time frame that you can take before you have to give a statement in response to a police shooting. And that's obviously for important reasons. Somebody mentioned adrenaline. You are not thinking clearly. I guarantee you are not thinking clearly. You just had a traumatic event. People could talk all they want, have all the bravado they want about what they would have done in that situation or not done. Shooting somebody and taking somebody's life is a pretty traumatic situation. And with everything that goes around it, you are not going to be thinking clearly. And it's important before you give a statement that you be thinking clearly and have the benefit of some counsel to do that.
Yeah. And I just, that kind of goes back to a little bit of my issue with, some of these statements like, I smoked that guy, Folks, it's one thing if you have to defend yourself, but what I can tell you too is even if you end up not getting charged and something like this happens where now you're questioned, not only is the shooting going to have a traumatic impact on you, whether you believe it or not, but on top of that, if you have any guilt left over where people are constantly questioning, and never mind the fact that you're now probably going to be famous and God forbid, you're probably not going to get employed. And all those, this can have such a major ramification and cascading effects for every piece of your life. So you got to have your ducks in a row. And that's, and listening to these people that are genuinely flippant about carrying a gun, that tells me they're not training. They've done no research. They know nothing about the law. And they're so flippant about carrying a gun and they know so much that's not true. Right. So, they're walking around with this false sense of, I don't even know what, bravado, security, whatever it is, but they're just spewing pure ignorance and they're walking around with a gun and living in another world that doesn't exist, because if they act the way that they talk about their acting, they're going to end up in jail or dead. So, that's one of the real issues I had with this whole thing. The other thing, we've talked a lot about what as a shooter you can't do. Let's talk about some things that people may not react where they can and they should. Bill, can you talk a little bit about disparity of force?
Sure. Disparity of force is a concept that The law often says, words should be met with words, fists should be met with fists, deadly force can be met with deadly force. And that's the common, genre or message you get in the law, generally speaking. But disparity of force would be, I gave an example earlier, a unarmed man who's size of Gary coming after a 5'2" woman with a firearm. Well, even though she has the firearm and he doesn't, her use of deadly force may be perfectly appropriate because there's a disparity of force associated with that situation. Or if I was in a parking lot and I was being surrounded by 4 guys with clubs or fists, but I was in reasonable fear of my life or serious bodily injury, I would have a right legally to use deadly force because there would be a disparity of force, even if they didn't have a firearm. So it very much depends on the circumstances of the case to determine whether or not, again, the actions you took were reasonable based on the circumstances.
Yeah, no, that's something, again, I guarantee you there are people that are, dead today. And especially when it comes to females, this is something I like to talk about specifically to females, because, there's women that are carrying a gun that suddenly 1, maybe 2 big guys are coming at them, and they're afraid to use that firearm because they think another firearm or a knife or something, some sort of deadly weapon has to be present to justify their use of deadly force. It's just not the case. So, that is another area that you need to be aware of, that shouldn't have to be in the middle of it where you're running through this deep, dark analysis and legal analysis, or, wringing your hands of whether or not you need to know this stuff, and you need to play this stuff out in those what if scenarios in your mind, as well as get scenario based training with us or with somebody else that does training like us, so that you've already done something similar before. I think we can all agree that if this gentleman, going back to the Houston situation or even the other situations, any of those people that used what they thought was defensive deadly force, if they were able to do that scenario 10 times, they would do it better and better in each time, right? But, and that's essentially what scenario-based training allows you to do. And then you take the concepts and the principles from that training, and then you can play other scenarios through your mind, practicing when you're without. So you're doing those what if scenarios, and you're keeping your mind sharp to where you've already been there before when the real thing happens. And again, all your training, it allows you to make those good decisions under stress, and it allows you not to be, you're freeing up resources mentally, right? You're freeing up those resources mentally because you've already figured this part out. Now it's just a matter of, hey, where do I need to be? Where is cover? All of those, the tactical decisions, because all the other ethical and legal decisions you've made because you know that innately. So you don't have to, you're not having to spend all those mental resources on that and taking up time.
That's really, really exceptional point Gary makes, because, we do this all the time, and that is these scenarios in your head. And one thing about this Houston guy, let's just go back to it for a second. You do it again. One of the things he could have done is not drawn his gun and let the whole thing play out.
Yeah.
He could have sat there and nobody got hurt. The robbery happened and the guy left and there was no deadly force encounter. So he was not obligated to do anything. And I think everyone has to have that red line in the sand as to when you're going to act. Yeah. And it's different for everybody. And there's no cowardice in not doing something. You have no obligation to do anything. But all of us, I think, have one line or another, and it would depend on the circumstances. Maybe if I have a child with me, my circumstances and my decision making is entirely different than if I don't. If my wife is with me, it's different. If there are other people around, it may be different. And you take these scenarios, and as Gary said, you run them through your mind. If this guy comes in, doesn't show a gun, but just tries to rob the place, do you pull the gun? Do you pull a gun then to try to stop him? Mm-hmm. If he fires one into the air, but doesn't shoot any or doesn't point it at anybody, then do you do it? Obviously, if he shoots somebody, then that's maybe a different line in the sand for you. So you have to run through these scenarios in your mind as to when you're going to act and why you would act and what situation you would act, and equally as important, what situations you're not going to act. Yeah. You don't have to pull your firearm. Yeah. It may be the worst possible decision based on circumstances. This guy, even given the fact that he was involved in the shoot, I don't know where he had that thing holstered. He was fumbling like crazy, trying to get it out of his waistband.
I still don't know what exactly he was doing. I don't know. It almost looks like he had it in some like a fanny pack on the left side of him.
He's right-handed, but he had it somewhere on his left side. I really don't understand.
You guys have no idea how many times I zoomed in and watched that in like slow-mo over and over and over, trying to figure out what the hell he was doing there. So, that's a whole nother thing too, is making sure that your holster makes sense, making sure, and that's one of the things that we do too, folks. In our advanced concealed carry courses, we teach people to shoot from a seated position, to draw and shoot from a seated position. Can you do that with the holster that you're using? Can you do that from sitting in the car? These are all questions that you shouldn't have to figure out the answer to when you're in the middle of a shooting. So that's our job, is to play those scenarios out and push those. Number one, give you the training, tell you what could happen, why it could happen, and then play those scenarios out, and then allow you to get repetitions with that to figure out. And that's another thing that I kept hearing. Nobody knows what they're going to do. Yeah, nobody knows what they're going to do to some extent. But if you don't know how you would perform under at least a basic amount of stress, then, man, get some training. Because I know I do my best not to project my skills and ability and experience on other people. But at the same time, I know what I would do. And yes, I've had more training than most people. I do this for a living. I think about these things for a living. All of that's true. But if you're carrying a gun, guess what? It's your freaking job to make sure that you are making good decisions, and you're basing those good decisions on real knowledge, not things that you're just coming up with out of the air that you think is to be true. You got to get somebody like Bill to talk to him and make sure that you are operating in some reality and some truth.
Or, you get the basic concepts, and I think what Gary said is exactly right. You have to clear your mind of all these decisions that you'd have to make in this situation. In other words, have them made already.
Yeah.
You already know what you're going to do, and you know what your rights are. Because once you're in that scenario, there's not a lot of time to start analyzing the situation and trying to figure out what the right thing to do is.
Yeah.
So that's why it's important.
Absolutely. You see bad guy focused away from you, but you move laterally to draw, and your movement draws bad guy's attention. Wouldn't that movement be counterproductive? Yes. And that's what I was talking about earlier about context, right? So I don't need to necessarily. Now, I will tell you, even if his back is toward me, depending on the room and my backdrop, right, I am probably going to be moving laterally once I start shooting. Because if he does turn toward me, number one, I want him to turn toward the last shot, not where I am as I continue to move. And this is the same concept when you're using lights, right? So if you're using flashlights, folks, lights on your guns, all right, we're not keeping those things on. We're flashing, shooting, and moving the entire time. So they never know where, because they're completely blinded. I don't want them to shoot toward my light or the sound of the last shot and be able to hit me. So it's the same concept. Of course, again, you got to take all this and again, with, a good 2-day class, and then plus a whole bunch of more things prior to that, right? We can put these things in context and answer these questions, but you're right. It's about choosing the tactic that makes the most sense at the time. Go to OG Steve there. I recently became all but crippled, and I were to get knocked down, it could break my neck and sever my spinal cord. So I contacted an attorney about using weapon. He said that I would be protected if I can prove your disability. Well, you'd also have to prove, well, Bill, I'll let you handle that.
Well, again, it goes back to, and it's an important point, it goes back to disparity of force, obviously, with respect to you versus somebody who doesn't have those disabilities. And secondly, what's reasonable for you to believe is a situation where you are exposed to potential serious bodily harm or deadly encounters. And that's going to be different for you than it is for others.
Yeah, throw that down to Christian Clark. That is absolutely true. Christian is very difficult to shoot from a seated position out of an MRAP. There's no doubt about that. For those who don't know, MRAP is a big mine resistant anti something vehicle. I forgot what the P stands for, but anyways, now it's going to bug me. Mine resistant anti ambush proof. Ah, that's what it is. Mine resistant, ambush proof. Unless you're in the turret. Yes, that's also a lot easier to shoot from the turret. That is also true. For me, just fitting in an MRAP is hard. Hopefully you're still not in one, Adam. All right. Of course, you could be active duty and you guys training in MRAPs all the time. Bill, back to you. I keep interrupting you.
That's quite all right. I'm here for you, Gary. Gary mentioned the women's situation before, and I think in West Virginia and a lot of states there is women have special protections when it comes to being abused women. They can use deadly force where in scenarios that you perhaps may not think others can. In West Virginia, the famous case involving a woman who had been abused by her husband for years, and he fell asleep drunk after abusing her that day. He was asleep on the couch or passed out from being drunk. She got the shotgun, shot him on the couch, killed him right there.
She didn't get any charges?
Oh, she was charged and she was actually convicted. And then the Supreme Court said, let her out.
Gotcha.
And they reversed the decision and said she's totally innocent. And because the reasonableness of her situation put her in constant fear of serious bodily injury or potential death based on the history between her and her husband. So everybody, people hear that, they go, what do you mean? He was sleeping on the couch. She shot him dead and she got away with it. Yeah, she did. And they said, and it's one of those cases that, you look at it, you have to read it 2 or 3 times, because the Supreme Court sometimes will reverse cases in criminal cases and tell you, they need a new trial or the law was wrong, or you have to do it again. I've less than 2 or 3 in my entire life that I've seen that a court said, not only are they innocent, but let them out of jail right now. And they're free. They'll never be charged again.
Wow.
So,
and so their conviction is completely annulled. I mean,
it's gone.
Wow.
It's never happened. Never happened. And I'll be honest, I've given classes before, and there's some guys that have squirmed in the class.
Hey, you can't be beating women down here in West by God, Virginia.
It can't be, By the way, in Virginia, that doesn't fly. They did not. They don't think that's a good deal.
Yeah.
They would prosecute the woman, but not in West Virginia. So
something
to keep in mind.
See, we take care of women here in West Virginia. Virginia, they don't care about women.
Yeah. It's got the threat to you. One of the things we haven't mentioned, the threat to you has to be imminent. Can't be something that happens later on, or if you think it's going to happen. You can't lay traps for people that you think are going to come after you, and you're going to get them when they get there. That kind of stuff. It has to be proportional. We've talked about that a little bit. Firearms on top of firearms, or other deadly weapons. If somebody comes at me with a bat, that's a deadly weapon.
Yeah.
Or something, or a car, for instance, that would be a deadly weapon. The one thing I always tell people when they carry firearms is, just keep in mind, there are laws against brandishing firearms just for purposes of how cool you are or how tough you are.
Or to intimidate somebody.
I've seen that before. I've seen people charged as they're going past you, like they're going to do something about it. Or they show their gun to somebody who's bothering them as some kind of, implied threat. You go to jail for that. I mean, I think rights and everything associated with that all the time. And I'm a big Second Amendment right guy, but here's what we have to do. We have to be good citizens.
Yeah.
Because we only need one idiot, okay, to make the rest of us look bad.
100%.
And so if you're going to carry a firearm, you better be responsible. You should be responsible about it, and do the right things, because really you're carrying not only your reputation, but the reputation of all of us out there, and it makes things harder for everybody.
Yeah. And we've made huge inroads when it comes to concealed carry permits, showing up in states that, just hadn't historically had that. We've had several additional states, which West Virginia is a constitutional carry state. But again, folks, all of that can be done away with real quick. And again, why we're seeing these states that traditionally didn't have or historically didn't have a, concealed carry permit or allowed that, or even constitutional carry states that are now, is because, look, they're looking at the data and they're looking at popular opinion. I mean, that's what politicians do. So, a couple of bad cases can sway that way back in the other direction real quick. So, just like Bill said, we need to be good citizens. We need to be moral people if we're carrying a firearm. And, there's more to it than just what you can necessarily think you can legally can do. Again, we just need to be thinking about the big picture altogether, all facets of it. Mike Ken says, can you speak to avoidance? Yeah,
Sure.
do that.
Everybody heard of the so-called stand your ground laws. Everybody gets all in a huff about one way or the other on the media. And basically that's the question is whether or not you have a duty to retreat, a situation before you can use deadly force. West Virginia, we do not have a duty to retreat. If you're legally in a place publicly or in your home, there is no obligation for you to retreat before you use deadly force if that's required. A lot of states still have a duty to retreat. There are some states that you have to go hide or run away for even in your own house before you can use deadly force, and you have to go to the darkest corner of the farthest room and have no other escape before you can use deadly force. Or if you're in a public place, you need to leave the area. You can't engage in deadly force if you have any kind of escape route. With that said, I might say that maybe the smartest decision you make is to use what I call the 2-foot defense. Use your 2 feet and get the hell out of there. That may be the smartest thing you can do. Yeah. But no, there's no obligation to retreat in West Virginia. It hasn't been the case since the 1800s. So that's pretty straightforward.
Adam Marcus Berry says, Bill, do you know the case off the top of your head where the Supreme Court said once lethal force is authorized, the law does not care how it is carried out by car, hammer, gun, fist, etc.?
No, I don't know the name of that case there, but I've never, I think the courts would take the position that lethal force is lethal force, no matter the mechanism. The only thing I'll say is that, I could see things going pretty badly quickly if, I'm using my fist, just pounding the snot out of somebody on the ground until they're dead.
Yeah.
I mean, I think at some point that threat has ended. And
pull that back up there, Summer, because I think, again, there's some nuance here when it comes to just because lethal force, you can use lethal force, doesn't mean that you can continue to kill a person beyond that. And I think, things like this that confuse people to some extent, that they start conflating different things here. Yeah, you can use a hammer or whatever else, but if after that first blow that you hit them,
stop, it hurts. Yeah, please, I give up.
I give up, or they're knocked out. All right, doesn't mean you get to turn their brain parts into hamburger, right? So, again, just because lethal force could be used at one moment, doesn't mean things are going to dramatically change within a second later. What about open carry? All right, so I have a probably a non-conventional take on open carry. I like open carry. I like when people do it. I'm not going to do it. And I mean that genuinely. It's not one of these things where I like people to do that so that, it can be brought so that they're the target. There's some of that, again, if they're the target, I'm not, that gives me a tactical advantage. There's no doubt about it. Without a doubt, folks, concealed carry gives you the ultimate tactical advantage. With that being said, I like open carry just from a legal and societal issue when it comes to, I like the fact seeing people carry a gun so that people see that there's people carrying a gun. We've gotten to such a point in our society to where it's like people see a gun and they freak out, in some states more than others, right? In some cities more than others, and all those things. So I don't really necessarily have a problem with open carry, and I'm not one of these guys that bashes those people that are open carry. I do not like the folks that open carry just to get attention or to instigate issues. I think there's a problem with that. Do they have the right to do that? Am I thoroughly against these videos where I see law enforcement, harassing these guys that are open carry, and they're clearly there to kind of cause a problem? I don't think it's right. I don't agree with that. But at the same time, it is an opportunity to educate people about gun rights. And, I think if everybody open carried all the time, we'd be a much better society personally, and we wouldn't freak out about guns. So, that's just kind of my personal take on it. Bill, you got anything to say to that?
I agree with you in the sense that I've never understood. I mean, I don't have any problem with people open carrying. That's fine. In fact, I like the fact I know where the other guns are if I have that opportunity. But if I carry, I'd want the tactical advantage of people not knowing I'm carrying. That gives me an advantage that, somebody who's open carrying doesn't do it. Now, I'll just say this with respect to open carry. The only time it annoys me is when the person, they're carrying the AR-15 in Walmart.
Yeah.
Because, okay, you can do it. Big deal. Congratulations. Now, the old woman down the aisle just called the police saying there's a guy with a gun in Walmart. Yeah. You know what happens then? I get delayed because the police show up and all hell breaks loose. Yeah. And even if it's totally innocent, it's just meaningless at that point. I think those people are there to make a statement.
They're activists. And I don't know. I always go, look, we got a lot of crazy activists on the left that are making inroads on some of these things. And I'm all about a little pushback. It's not the way that I would do it. And I do think that often causes more problems. It's not necessarily all that productive, but I can relate to where they're coming from to some extent.
I mean, I like to educate people as opposed to, the other side, as opposed to, throwing it in their face kind of thing. I had this conversation not too long ago about hollow point bullets at my the dinner table I grew up in New York, so you can imagine some of my relatives are just pure Second Amendment people. And they want to talk to me about hollow point bullets and how they kill people. And, it was an interesting conversation, but I think actually I've probably turned them around by the time we were done. And I would just say for the folks generally, if you're putting target ammunition, just solid ball ammunition in your pistols and going out there with your firearm, you're asking for trouble, folks.
Yeah.
That defensive ammunition was made for a reason, and not the least of which is that it potentially protects you, not all the time, but potentially protects you about over penetration going through a variety of things, because you're responsible for that thing once it leaves the barrel, whoever it hits, no matter what you did. One of the things, the guy in Houston we talked about, he was firing. There was that patron back in the far corner there.
Yeah.
Like, you better be hitting the right guy, because if I'm that patron, I'm hitting the deck.
And I know for a fact, I'd bet any amount of money that when that guy was pulling that trigger, he had no clue,
no way,
no thought of that guy being back there, no awareness whatsoever. And what Bill's talking about is right. Is there again? It goes back to education, right, and why training is so important. Making sure you're carrying the right ammunition for the right purpose, right, and even doing some research in that. Not all hollow points perform equally. You can delve into that. That's 10 YouTube videos that you can go down a rabbit hole with on by itself. But most importantly, besides it protecting other people by not over penetrating, more importantly, or just as importantly, it's because it's dumping all of that energy into that threat. So you are going to suppress that threat much quicker. So you have to use less ammo, and ammo's not cheap, folks. We need to get the most amount done with the least amount of ammo so that we don't have to spend so much money on it.
I think one of the fun things to do actually at our range is to ammo on structures, drywall, and other things that you would normally see in your day-to-day life, and see what it does, see how far it goes. It's eye-opening. Let me just say that.
It is. And if you come to our level 3 courses, we cover that. I thought I heard something about using ammo designed to kill someone more than regular ball can be used against you. Absolutely not. It's defensive ammo.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, using ball ammo can be used against you because you're an irresponsible a-hole that's out there. Number one, when you're talking about ball ammo doesn't expand. And the big point of that when it comes to the ballistic problems that we have with ball ammo is that it's what we call basically just ice picks through something, right? So it's going through there so fast, and it's designed to not create resistance. So it's doing very little damage. So it's dumping very little of the energy inside the target. So therefore it has plenty of energy once it leaves the target. So not only are you not putting that threat down efficiently, but again, most of that energy is going to be expended outside of that threat. So now over penetration is without a doubt going to happen. So that's the problem. And that even goes back to the old misnomer of 9 mil ammunition isn't lethal, or a 9 mil isn't lethal. It's because we in the military went from 45, these slow big rounds, to 9 mil, and we were shooting ball, and yeah, it was just spiking through them. The same thing even goes with 5.56. If you're using the wrong ammo, 5.56 is, I'll tell you folks, when you see an actual bullet wound that goes through a person that hits nothing but flesh, you have to spread, you can't even find the wound. And that's the entrance or the exit. When you're talking about either green tip or ball ammo, like, you can't find the wound, internal, the entrance wound or the exit wound, unless it's hit bone and starts to tumble or something like that. I've seen plenty of, bad guys out on the battlefield. They're small and skinny. That thing zipped right through them. Number one, they didn't even know they were hit. They still continue to fight. Yeah, they're bleeding internally. They're not having a good day, and they don't have long to live. But when it's all said and done, you can't even find the bullet wound to begin with. So again, making sure you're using the right ammunition is really important. And again, it goes back to Aaron. You got to get some training buddies so that you're not falling for some of this nonsense out there.
Yeah, and I think and I'll just touch base again with what Aaron said, and that is that I guess a prosecutor, somebody could make a case that, oh, you're using hollow point ammunition, it's a man killer ammunition. Well, here's the problem with that. You know what most of the police departments carry? Hollow point ammunition.
Yeah.
So, my constant response is, I want to use what he's using.
Yeah.
And, they use it for a reason. It's scientifically designed to do that which it's intended for. That is, stop somebody without over penetration.
Yep.
That's basically what you want.
And that is the responsible ammo to carry, period. Just like hunting, right? We want something that's going to expand and do the exact same thing and not over penetrate and hit a hunter 3 miles away after you shot the deer with that ball ammunition, because you're a cheap bastard.
I would note that in my experience, also something to do, even though it's expensive, make sure your gun can shoot that ammo, because some guns don't shoot some of that personal
100%.
defense ammo as well as the regular ammo,
Especially compact guns.
correct.
Yep.
And also make sure it's a little different. So, buy a couple of boxes and then test it out just to be sure it's shooting just like your target ammo shooting.
Yep. All good. Especially the old M&P shields. They were bad about that.
Mm-hmm.
Also heard prosecutors allege that training means that you're trained to kill. I'll let you talk on that, Bill.
I will take that case every day. That's fine. I understand that argument, I guess, to some extent, that, you try to get training, but I think, one of the witnesses would be, witness A would be, why you train? Well, you train because so you make the right decisions in the right circumstances, as opposed to an untrained person. And, that's a pretty easy argument to defeat. And most rational people will reject it pretty handily.
And if I was an instructor and they called me to the stand, that's exactly what I would say. I would lay out my curriculum. I would tell you how it's done. You know what I would do? I'd pull up this video. I bring in there and hey, look, there's Gary Melton talking about how it's important to be responsible, making sure that you're making good decisions, legal decisions, and making sure that you are aware of people around you to make sure that you are not doing something wrong, ethically, legally, or tactically. So, again, it's a responsible citizen that cares about, number one, we don't ever want to have to use our firearm, but if we do, guess what? We want to make sure that we do it ethically and legally.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's about.
Sure.
I know, Steve. I'm just joking when it comes to big difference between being cheap bastard and poor. I know. I guess we need to quit training SFLS. Well, look, again, any of our military force, they're meant to be a lethal force. So apparently the current top brass doesn't realize that, but it is what it is.
You want to get a real education of why people should get trained. Just go to any gun store on a Saturday and watch people buying guns. I swear to God, you would not want half of those people carrying anything more than a paperweight. It astounds me. It shocks me.
I've been right there where I'm like, ooh, I'm walking out of here.
They're looking at waving around the gun and pointing into people and everything else, and they say, "Oh, I want to call it carried for self-defense." I'm going, "Oh, dear God, please."
Yeah, there's a couple of stores around here that folks behind the counter should be getting hazard pay. There's no doubt about it. Mike, bring your Top Gun cups to demonstrate proficiency. Absolutely. Top Gun cups.
I know who Mike is. He should shut up about that.
I don't know, Mike. you bring all 30 cups you have, and that might be held against you for some reason. What else we got?
Just give it to him the first when he shows up the first day. It saves us time at the end of the.
Well, we got to start doing. We got to do a trade-in thing for you. Like you get 10 of them or so. You trade it up for like a larger cup or something like that.
Maybe when you can give a mug like "Be Like Mike," it just says "Be Like Mike" on it or something. That's
right. What else we got going on here? Any other questions that we haven't hit? What else you got to cover, Bill?
Oh, I think that's about it. I just encourage people to, and I'll get you some materials for purposes of your newsletter or something else. There really are some fairly straightforward videos. There are active shooter YouTube videos that you see these kinds of scenarios all the time. I look at that stuff all the time, just because I just think it's interesting how various people look at things and how people react, and you do get a sense for it. But, you know, I can't emphasize enough that people need to, you don't need to be a lawyer. You don't need to go to law school.
Yeah.
You're not going to, I'm not expecting you to read the law and read all the cases or anything like that. But you do have an obligation, if you're going to carry a firearm, to know what you can do, when you can do it, and why you can do it. And the only way to do that is do some basic research. Let me tell you, with the internet today, there's almost no reason why you can't find it. And it's really, really pretty easy to find. I mean, 30 years ago, yeah, I understand. I mean, it wasn't easy to find.
Pretty much anyone can be a lawyer these days.
That's about right. Trust me. That's about right. And most people try to be.
100%.
But there's summaries for these various laws and standards in various states, and then you get training, and then you can go through these scenarios, and you can ask people like Gary and others that are teaching the class about what you can do, what you can't do.
You know, I was after I had done that reaction video, I was texting Bill. I was like, hey, you know, would you be interested in coming over and doing this? I think it'd be really good. And he's like, yeah, I watched your video. I was worried about you. I tried not to get too outside of my. I think outside of my
wife said, "What's wrong?" I said, "Oh no!" But I watched the whole thing, and actually, you did a nice job. I told you that.
No, I appreciate that.
And
I almost powdered my wig, put that on, got that ready, got my gavel out.
No, it was good, and you know, again, credit to Gary for making this subject an important part of training for people. And you know, I go to enough of these classes, and if you see me there, feel free to ask me questions. I'll be happy to answer them anytime. And trust me, you wouldn't want to pay my hourly rate. So free legal advice, you just take it.
Yeah, and definitely not to put you on the spot while you're here, Bill, but if you definitely would like to throw together some articles and stuff like that for our Substack, I would really appreciate that.
Happy to.
And we'd really, really enjoy that. Yeah, and I will definitely do some other things like this. I'll definitely start making this. I know not everybody can come to our courses, and sometimes I take that for granted, right? I know some of you probably don't have good instructors around, or somebody that you trust, whether it comes to firearms or even talking about these types of things, and even tactical self-defense scenarios and those. So I will definitely start doing some more videos like the one that I did, maybe breaking things down of what, you know, people did right, what they could have done better, and things like that. And Jeff Hahn, yes, we do simunition training. As a matter of fact, our CQB courses and our advanced concealed carry courses, we incorporate simunition. So anyways, definitely check that out. And folks, again, if you didn't know already, we have posted up 99% or about 95% of our course schedule. So make sure you go check out ParamountTactical.com. The other thing that we're launching right now, I just finished editing the orientation video, is our online training academy. Folks, I'm really excited about this. It's going to be a great push. It's going to allow you guys to essentially get personalized training from a virtual standpoint from us. And for those of you that already signed up, number one, you'll get that orientation video posted in the morning, so you'll be able to watch that. And I will have the first training video early this upcoming week, if not by this weekend. And then we will definitely get, again, 3 more videos out this month for that. So I'm going to catch up on that. I appreciate everybody checking that out. So go to Patreon. Paramount Tactical or Paramount Tactical Patreon, either one. If you Google either one of those, the link is also on most of our YouTube pages. But I'm going to start pushing more information out on that. But I'm going to make the orientation video, either all of it or portions of it, public, and I'll probably post it on our YouTube page so that you know exactly what you're getting. And I promise you, the $30 a month that it currently costs for that training, folks, you'll number one, you'll greatly improve, and on top of that, you'll save that money just in one training session where you're not wasting ammo and you're getting real training with real results. And that's what it's about. So now, of course, virtual training doesn't completely replace in-person training, but it will go a long way, and it's better than what most of you are doing. And these sessions that I have coming up, folks, are short, intense sessions. And that's what I found that people learn from the most. So you're not spending a lot of time, you're not spending a lot of ammo, and you're going to get real training. You're going to be able to focus on one thing or a couple of little things and make sure you get the repetitions in both live fire and dry fire. And you're going to walk away improved. And then we're going to have something for you the next week and the next week and the next week. And eventually we'll have a whole library of these training sessions that you'll be able to reference. Anything that you want to work on will be there. And it also gives you additional discounts both to our training and to anything that we carry. We're going to take care of our online training academy alumni. So just be aware of that and look for more information on that. I think I'm excited about it. It's going to be a success, and I think you guys are going to like it. Let's see. Thank you both for putting this together. It's really appreciated. Yeah, thank you guys. We always appreciate you guys showing up, whether it's Wednesday or a Thursday, that we had a special edition, and hopefully you guys got a lot out of it. Bill, you got anything else?
No, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, no, man, we appreciate you coming. We really do. Well, folks, I want you guys to have a wonderful week. God bless you all. Stay armed, stay ready, and we'll talk to you again next Wednesday.